Hi everyone, this is Ali John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and today I'm here with Fern Schumer Chapman, author. And today we have a very special episode because we're going to be talking about the ownership of fixing a sibling relationship. And relationships are really complex, and the ones with estranged siblings are no exception. And if we're not careful, we can fall into the trap of taking on responsibility in fixing the relationship as though it was only on our shoulders. And in this important episode, we'll explore the risks associated to taking on sole ownership in fixing an estranged sibling relationship and in how we can have a more proactive response with respect to sustaining or letting go of an otherwise unhealthy sibling relationship. So, Fern, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, this is an important topic. Fixing can be a trauma response, and it's often rooted in the fear of abandonment. It has long tentacles. Growing up, some felt they have to fight for love because it was very conditional, or you had to prove your worth to earn the respect and validation of others. And it can lead to real problems in present day relationships because the risk is that the family may decide to kill the messenger. And you do not want to be the messenger or the fixer in that case.
That is so true, Fern, right? And we hear about this and we see this constantly in the sibling estrangement community, especially with people that have been given this title or that they've taken this on. And some people may be asking, what is the fixer exactly, right? And one of the most important roles we can identify within the family setting is what's known as the fixer. It's a very common experience. And it's the person who is either consciously sought after to fix things within the family or the one who seems to see through the illusions and is able and willing to attempt at creating wholesomeness within a family, right?
Right. And they can have some success, but they can also be doing this for very um, unfortunate reasons, like they're trying to control more than they can control and overcompensate for their own failings or limitations.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think that the role can be carried on in particular when a sibling relationship breaks down, right? The fixer can be forcibly told to do something or actually just even step in voluntarily to make things right as though they're called to be the ones to make things better, right?
Yeah, it can almost be like a compulsive need to help.
Right, exactly. So some people might actually think that this sounds very familiar, right?
Yeah, I mean, the intentions are really good, but are you overstepping is the question.
Exactly. And I think that some of our viewers have engaged in this behavior, having read the comments and heard from some people. And really, this can be a tiring endeavor, right? It can limit the amount of responsibility on another sibling in owning the outcome for their behavior, right? And it's automatically assumed that the other person will step in and try to repair it, right? That's the role of the fixer is to repair. And therein lies the trap, right? In thinking that it's all on us to somehow make it right or that we take on the brunt of the task.
Right. So it's important to differentiate between genuine support and the desire to control or define your self-worth through fixing.
Yes, very much so. So let's talk about the risks in being the fixer, right? We're already getting into some of that. And I think that one of them that we were talking about before the video was actually emotional burnout, right? And how it is that this type of over responsibility can be tiresome and really increasingly draining to always be the ones putting ourselves out there to repair. And I think that a lot of times people do this because they hope that others in the family can learn about what a repair attempt looks like. When in fact, what they do really is that they step back and let us do all the hard work at our own expense over time if we're not careful, right?
So what you're basically doing is creating emotional dependency and a codependent dynamic and possibly enabling bad behavior where people don't take responsibility for themselves.
Exactly, right? So, though the intention is good, it can end up becoming something else entirely, right?
Right.
And another thing that can happen is that people can become a scapegoat, right? And for whatever reason, the family situation persists we can be quick to be blamed as if we're seen as the understanding ones, right? Or the ones that bring up uncomfortable issues, thus putting us at risk of doubling down our efforts at buying the peace once again, right?
Well, and you can actually be working against your own best intentions. And that is that rather than, like I said before, you're creating a codependency and you're actually limiting the family member's personal growth and depriving them of the opportunity to grow from these important communications
Mm-hmm.
because you now entered the picture and manage for them.
Exactly, right? And that's something that really is important for us to be mindful of in sibling relationships and such. And I think one other thing that tends to happen also is the idea of neglecting our own needs, right? By constantly being the one that repairs, we can run the risk of putting aside our own needs at the expense of others, right? And we were talking about how we can twist ourselves to fit into the mold earlier, you and I, right? And the expectation, right, that others in the family will look out for your own needs as you do theirs. And that's blatantly false because if they're not empathic, they won't think like an empathic person.
Right. And that can be really disappointing
Yeah.
to suddenly realize that there's no reciprocity in this deal.
Hmm. Exactly. And I think another thing that we were kind of touched upon here is the idea of enabling dysfunction if we're not careful, right, in terms of risks. And sometimes space can be necessary in healing, right? When people have some time apart from one another, it can really help them to reflect. And if we're too quick at wanting to fix things, it could be seen as invalidating the reasons why relationships break down. And we got to keep on telling ourselves there's a reason it got to that point in some family dynamics. It's important to understand that the why before actually working on the problem itself or in helping others that don't want to be helped.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And what you're really saying is that you have to be able to tolerate some discomfort in these relationships so that you can step away and they can grow a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh, I think fixers have a tendency to run in, put out the fire and be the hero, and it doesn't necessarily work that way, and actually you can end up creating a lot of animosity and resentment from other family members or the person you're fixing as well.
Exactly. And that's where this leads is the next point here, which is facing emotional immaturity from others, right? And while we may want to have more peace within the family, because we tend to more easily navigate through feelings, it may not be the case with other people. And I think that as a fixer, you may be met with hostility or the inability on the part of others to be emotionally available, accountable, or capable in expressing their wants and needs. And this can cause a deterioration of dialogue in which our siblings can regress into power driven roles by falling into control, coerciveness, blame shifting, or outright silence.
And that brings me to a really important point, which is why are you fixing? I
Mm-hmm.
suspect that there were patterns in your childhood where you were in this role and felt an obligation to carry the larger part of the family. Um, a lot of times, fixers, I think, were parentified as kids. In other words, they assumed the role of a parent, even though they were children and certainly not able or emotionally capable of taking care of their parents' needs. But that's what they were cast into
Yeah,
as a role, and that ends up producing these kinds of tendencies of a fixer as an adult.
exactly. It germinates within childhood and can sometimes, of course, just develop more into adulthood and grow fully and such into these types of behaviors. So, actually, this leads us really well into the next part, which is the what can we do, right? I think this is really, really important, right, for our viewers.
Right.
And I think first one of them is to recognize that if you were inadvertently ascribed the fixer label in your family from childhood or from otherwise, asking yourself who does the most repairing, and if it's actually worked out or not. Because a lot of times, we can think about how certain things will play themselves out in our own heads, and in our own heads it can be very clear, right? But in reality, it can be otherwise. It can be something else completely in terms of outcome.
Yeah, it's really important to reflect on these patterns of behavior, where they came from, why you do it, maybe even journal about them so that you can look at what your impulses are and other ways you might approach the issue.
Hmm. Exactly. I think that's really, really important to look at that and such. And recognize that it's impossible to fix everything or every situation. And that if you haven't quite found the solution, it may well be that it's not for you to fix, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure many situations are yours to fix. I think I've come full circle on this personally, and I think it's important to let others rise or fall on their own. It's a little bit like children, raising children. If you rescue them all the time, they never learn how to navigate the world on their own. And I think it's important for other people to navigate on their own.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point that you're making, of course, right? Giving onto others what they can work on themselves. And I think that training yourself gradually at refusing this label is really important, right? And to allow for others the opportunities, especially important. And at least, or at least if they can at least show that they have a valid interest in improving the relationship, that the motivation is there, right? That's really important for the fixer to realize, right? If the motivation is not there for somebody else, then really what you're doing is you're working with an incomplete element that is again outside your control.
And what are you getting out of it? I mean, is it that important to you to have this hero role, which isn't
Mhm.
going to go very far, really,
Mhm.
because it's more about you than them.
Exactly. And that's a big insight as well. Oftentimes, what the fixer does is more about their own willingness to feel better about the situation and see it improve, right? And that's one of the things that's important to look at, right? And I think also this leads us to the next point here, which is to respect people's timelines and ability in what is best for them, right? If you want it more than they do, then they won't be as willing to do the work. So,
And and if you have your own timetable and make it the schedule that you feel everybody has to conform to, once again, you're just trying to control the dynamic and the outcome and
yeah,
how fast it gets done. And that gets back to your point about how important it is to simply step away sometimes and absorb the experience and see if others can bring themselves to a better place.
exactly, right? And the next point is to mind your energy levels, right? You and I were talking about this a little bit before the video, right? How it can be draining over time to always have to put out fires, right? And right, we're not made as people to always swoop in when conflict arises. And your peace of mind matters as well. And I think seeking to protect it at all costs, as if it's worth gold, is really, really important because down the road, you'll see it as being worth more than anything else.
I I agree.
Yeah. So stepping back for our own good doesn't mean that we failed. It means that we've chosen our own personal peace in order to avoid taking on the brunt of other people's drama, hostility, or defense mechanisms. And stepping away graciously out of love can be an important life lesson for the fixer.
Right. It takes discipline.
Mhm.
And it takes an alteration in your impulses.
Yeah. So, Fern, I think that we've kind of done a full circle about this particular subject today. I think this has been a great conversation, and you and I are really, I think, thinking about different situations and scenarios we've been exposed to, right, when it comes to all this. So,
Well, as a reformed fixer, I think I can speak quite confidently about the dangers of this.
yeah, absolutely, right. So I think this brings us to our resources now, Fern. We're almost out of time. So, what would be a resource you'd recommend for our viewers at this time?
Well, I bring my lived experiences, of which there are many, and uh, I have survived so much dysfunction to my coaching sessions, and that's an opportunity for me as well as clients who may be struggling with these issues that we discussed today.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really important. And two of my resources, actually, I'm going to be working on that will be offered this fall is the group on rumination, on being able to manage rumination. I'm doing a one session intensive on this subject matter that has already been done with some of our members in the community and has been a success. So I invite people, of course, to reach out to me on this level to be able to register. This will be a small group of maximum 6 people that I'll be working with to help to impart this resource. And I think this is especially important. Plus, I'll be doing also the sibling estrangement support groups online as well, which are coming up soon. Plus, I'll be working on this other resource with grief as well that is going to be offered sometime later this year in the fall, presumably. So, yeah, so a lot of things going on, I think, on our plates, the both of us, especially, right?
Right. My advice related to this particular topic is to take off your fireman or firewoman's helmet.
Yes. Yes. Very important, right? Especially, and just be yourself and let others step in as well to share the responsibility. So, Fern, this has been great. Thank you so much for doing this. And I very
Pleasure.
much look forward to our next episode together.
Me too.
All right. You take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.